What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down why the market might try to go a little bit higher tomorrow, but then there's going to likely be a risk of us once again forming some kind of topping structure looking at the current trend, as we do have a very interesting pattern on the daily time frame. Typically, when we're red on Thursdays, we're green on Fridays. And when we're green on Thursdays, we tend to be red on Fridays. That happened every single time for the last month and a half. And I'm going to break down exactly why that is, and also what's happening with all the news coming out for tomorrow and such. And once again, why I think the market's near a top and why there's going to be likely a pullback next week. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. So right now the market's bullish. Higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, and higher lows. But notice a very interesting pattern right here. Okay, let's start with the month of August of 2025. Okay, look at the candlesticks right here. On Thursday, August 7th, 2025, we actually had a red close. We started off with a push, then we just dumped. And then on Friday, August 8th, we saw a rally and we ended up closing green. All right, so that was 1 week. Look at the next week. The next week, on Thursday, August 14th, the market pushed upwards. On Friday, August 15th, we went a little higher, then we rejected and turned red. Okay, and then if we go to Thursday right here, which was August 21st, the market was red on Thursday. And then on Friday, August 22nd, we saw a big squeeze. Okay, then if we go to Thursday, August 28th, we were green, similar to how we were green today. And then on Friday, we saw a big sell off on SPY. That was 2 weeks ago. Last week on Thursday, we saw a big rally. We were pushing very nicely. That was September 4th. And then on September 5th, SPY went a little bit higher. It actually went about, let's just check this, like 3 points higher. Then we got this big rejection and we ended up closing in the red. So, what are you noticing? When there's a green close on Thursday, for the last month and a half, every single time that happened, the next day on Friday, we ended up closing red, or we saw like a little bit more upside, then we got a rejection, right? And every time we were red on Thursday, we were green on Friday. That happened every day for the last 6 weeks, every week for the last 6 weeks, excuse me. So what do I think is going to happen this time around? Well, Thursday was today. We got this nice rally. We're pushing very nicely, which I think is awesome. However, I am concerned about something. I think that the market has fully priced in the fact that the Fed is going to give us a cut. This is fully priced in for sure, in my opinion. And once this is completely priced in, when the Fed finally does it, the market's going to respond in a buy the rumors sold and news kind of like event. And that's going to likely cause the market to see a pullback next week, in my opinion. Now, for tomorrow specifically, we might go a little bit higher. We could push to about 658 to 660. Then we're going to see if we get some kind of rejection. I think the top the market's going to form is very close, and we only have a couple more points left before this thing eventually forms a topping candle. I also think that we might form a topping candle like next, maybe like tomorrow in the next trading session. And when you look at the daily time frame on SPY, we still have some gaps below. So the QQQ has a perfect looking rising wedge. It's a perfect rising wedge, which suggests we might go a little bit higher, but you have to be very careful, especially heading into next week, as the market's likely going to be forming a top. I'm going to break down more details about the levels to watch for and how I think this is going to move. Once again, we're still bullish. We might go a little higher on SPY, but I believe that the top is within days away. And then once FOMC comes, I think that's going to likely be the thing that finally causes the market to get that rug pull. I think that seasonality suggests that the second, more like the third and fourth weeks of September tend to be bearish. We still have a big bearish divergence developing on SPY, and the QQQ has a rising wedge. So once again, I would be very careful. We did say yesterday, I thought the market would push a bit more with CPI, but I warned you guys about the downside risk. This morning, I said we're going to likely push with CPI. I was expecting 656 on SPY. We went a little bit higher than that. We could go a little higher, but then, like I said before, a top is likely coming. So why did the market pump the way it did? Let's actually go over this. So there's good and bad news. The good news is that CPI was aligned with expectations. We had core CPI at 0.3% month over month, and core CPI year over year was at 3.1%. So that was also the same as what we saw before. CPI for all items was at 0.4%. This was technically above expectations. And all items CPI year over year was at 2.9%. Technically, this was close to expectations. So, what does this mean? Everything was close to expectations. But when you actually look at the charts, okay, CPI for all items went up quite a bit. And then CPI for core, that's basically CPI without food and energy. This was flat. So we actually saw inflation go up a little bit in the month of August. Although this is what the market was expecting, the market still rallied as a result because this isn't really that bad. It's only 0.2% up. And then overall, when it comes to our, overall chance of getting a cut, there is still a 100% chance the Fed is going to cut. I believe that this is almost fully priced in by now in the bonds market, which is why the reaction is going to likely be like a buy the rumor, sell the news kind of event. We rally into FOMC. We might even try to hold up approaching it. And then after FOMC, that's when we're going to likely see some kind of like corrective move. There's a 92.7% chance the Fed's going to give us a 25 basis point cut and a 7.3% chance the Fed's going to give us 50 basis points. Right now, the cut is looking more certain. When it comes to other pieces of news, President Trump did say 6 days ago, he said that he is going to be imposing substantial tariffs on semiconductors. The stock market is led by semiconductors like AMD and Nvda. And you have to remember that if he truly does this, it's going to have a very, very big effect on the markets. Although President Trump has not really given us an update since, if he does do something in the next week or two, that could also really affect this market. We're going to wait and see if something happens. Keep in mind that it's very probable that something will eventually happen. Because President Trump had to make it very clear that he's doing what he deems as necessary to try to bring semiconductor production more into the US. And then simultaneously, it's also very possible that President Trump has been very distracted by a lot of big things happening on the news lately. A lot of things have been happening that really took up a lot of President Trump's time, but he will once again, there's a good chance he might actually eventually do something to semiconductors. If it happens in the upcoming weeks, that could really affect this market. So just keep that as a heads up. The US budget deficit for August fell $35 billion or 9% as a result of the tariff revenues, which are once again causing it to decrease. This is once again what we were expecting. And then when it comes to more tariffs, we have Lutnick from the White House. He came out. He's the U.S. Treasury, not the Treasury, the Secretary of Commerce. He said that he's not really happy with India and the fact that they're buying Russian oil. He wants to see them continue to negotiate and sort things out if they stop buying oil from Russia. And he mentioned that once again, they're going to have to renegotiate a lot of trade deals if the Supreme Court does not really rule in favor of their tariffs. So there's a lot of updates about the tariffs. We're going to see what the Supreme Court tells us. And besides that, we have to be very, very patient. So what do we see for the markets? Don't forget that tomorrow is going to be Friday. There's not really much data coming out that's too significant. There's not too much when it comes to our overall, earnings. But tomorrow we do have some data, which is like minor. At 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report, the 5-year inflationary expectations report, and the current conditions report. So expect some volatility at 10 a.m. 30 minutes after the stock market opens, we have some data coming out. Right now, the stock market also is neutral. We're not too greedy or fearful. We're kind of like in the middle right now. Momentum is making up a lot of greed. There's a lot of greed for now as the market's pushing higher. The put to call option ratio is at greed as it's dipping, and then the VIX is at neutral. We're going to see if this shifts or not. Finally, also keep in mind that tomorrow is going to be September 12th. We have basically 160 or 260,000 of these calls expiring, and we have over 643,000 puts expiring for a 2.48 puts to call option ratio. 649 is our max pain, so we'll just have to see what happens from there. So what do I think is going to happen to the stock market? Well, it's quite simple. If we're bearish on SPY, okay, you need to see SPY fail at 655. If that fails us, if we lose the support right here, then yes, we could be dipping to like 652 or below. If you're bullish on SPY, you want to see us basically hold above 658. If that holds, we're looking for 660 or so, and then we're going to see if we form some kind of top soon. I predict what's going to happen is this. When you guys look at the pattern, typically on Thursdays when we're green, Fridays tend to end up closing red. And typically, the same thing happens vice versa. I would not be surprised if they try to push SPY a little higher to 658 to 660. Then we're going to see if we kind of turn down back down to 655 or so tomorrow to form some kind of topping candlestick. And then I do think that we're going to be forming a top very soon. I think that FOMC is going to be the big catalyst alongside President Trump's semiconductor tariffs that could be coming. That's going to cause a lot of downside next week by Friday. So I do anticipate a pullback by the third and fourth weeks of September of this year. I think there's a very, very high probability of this. I also have an AI model I want to show you that suggests it's going to come. I'm going to show you guys that over the weekend. So you want to be very, very careful. But that's what I think is going to likely happen to SPY. On the QQQ, if you're bullish, okay, if you want to be a big bull, you want to see the QQQ hold above 585. If that holds, we're going to be going for like 587 or 586.5 and 587. That's like the really bullish case to continue to break to all-time highs. If you're bearish, you want to see us lose 582.5 to 583. If that range fails us, we could be dipping to 580. I predict that what's going to likely happen is, we have this rising wedge right here. It's a very, very nice looking rising wedge. As you can tell, we're making higher lows. So we're favoring an attempt to push back up to about 587, or maybe a little bit under that. And we're going to likely complete this rising wedge. And then there's going to come a time when the QQQ starts to come back down and eventually loses 582. And then I do think there's going to be a substantial amount of downside after FOMC. So you want to be ready for that. But notice that, okay, we have like a topping pattern that's forming on SPY. There's a large bearish divergence. The QQQ also has a bearish divergence and a perfect rising wedge. There's no sign of it being done yet. So I do anticipate there's going to be some kind of downside move coming very soon. We might push a bit more tomorrow for 585 to 587. There might be a little bit more upside, but I do think we're going to be visiting a lot of these areas like this gap fill at 565 and even more low levels. Like there's another gap down here at like 530. I'm not sure if we go that low, but I do think it's going to be quite substantial. So be ready, guys. There's going to likely be some significant moves coming, especially after FOMC next week. On the IWM, we're looking bullish. We could go a little bit higher. The daily has an inverse head and shoulders, and it does suggest we could go as high as like 244. So could we push another like 1 to 2%? Yeah, we could go a little higher on the Russell. I don't think we're done yet with the rally. So if we end up losing 238, we could be dipping lower, but as long as we're above 240, we're going to be favoring 242 or above, and then eventually we're going to be forming a top to turn back down like this. So look for more upside for 242.5 than 244, and we'll see if we reject, but I do think it pushes a bit more. ES is not done yet. I do want to mention that the 6600s are new territory. I do think we might be pushing for 6600 or maybe a little bit above that. And then we're going to be looking for a top in the upcoming days because I think that once we get to FOMC, we're going to be looking for a substantial pullback. So please be very much just like prepared for it. I know this rising wedge is kind of like invalidated. It's not looking as clean as before, but either way, it doesn't even matter because we're still forming a double bearish divergence right here. If you look at the overall RSI and our MACD, the bearish divergence remains, and that could once again be another concerning factor. On NQ, we do tend to reject near 24,000. If we lose 23,800, we're looking for a dump. If 24,000 breaks, we could be looking for 24,200, and we're going to see if we reject off this or not. If not, we could be turning back down to 23,800, so you want to be very careful. On Bitcoin, we have a very, very nice looking inverse head and shoulders. If we end up losing 113,000, we're looking for a dump, but this is actually favoring 116,000. And we're going to see if this breaks down or not, but I'm still favoring upside for now on Bitcoin. Tesla's breaking out right now, which is awesome. I want to see us hold above 368. If we do, we're looking for the 370s, 370, then 375 is coming. But if we lose 363, we could return to 358. So hopefully Tesla kind of like shuffles here and retests 368. It's a tough resistance. Could go a little bit higher, but then be careful because we might kind of shuffle near this area. Tesla's still looking quite bullish. I want to see us hold above 368 to continue. Nvidia is dipping a little bit, so this could be another factor affecting the markets. We could be trying to form like an inverse head and shoulders. It does look to me like it's going to be retesting 174, and that could be a sign that the market might slow down a bit if Nvidia does slow down. So be careful with Nvidia. Apple's looking more bullish, favoring 232. It might be going a little bit higher for our 20 and 50 EMAs, so I do anticipate some upside for Apple. Netflix, it's dipping right here. We're going to watch 1215 as our potential target. Might bounce a bit, and we're going to see if we get some kind of rejection. MSTR is on a bit of a downtrend. We're going to see if 322 fails. If not, we could be dipping to 320. Celsius is going to likely push for 58.3. If that breaks, we're looking for essentially 59 as our potential target, as it's looking a bit more bullish. Supermicro has a nice inverse head and shoulders. As long as you don't lose 45.4, we're going to be favoring 48 as our targets. Palantir is dipping right here. We're going to see if 162 holds. If not, we're going to be dipping lower. But I anticipate a test of 162.18, so be ready for that, and we'll see if we bounce. Rivian needs to hold 13.98. If not, we're going to be dipping to 13.69. SoFi might be retesting 25.7, if not 25.25, and we'll see if we bounce. AMD is going to likely retest 157.6, if not 160, and we'll see if we reject. But look for a temporary bounce. ARM is looking more bullish. So long as we don't end up losing 151, we're going to be favoring 160 as our potential target. On PayPal, I could be looking for a test of like 68.25. There's a good chance it tries to go a little bit higher for now. Coinbase also looks bullish to me. It could be retesting 325, then eventually this 328 area again. So I think 328 is likely going to be tested. For Amazon, we kind of like have a head and shoulders. Unless we get back above 232, we're going to be favoring a move back down to 225. For Meta, we also happen to have a head and shoulders right here. So we're going to see if we hold above 753. If not, we could be tipping back down to like 745. So you want to be very careful. Google's also consolidating. We're going to see if we break past 240 to be bullish. We also have 236 as our main support right here. So it might be retesting 236, and we'll see if we break or not. Looking at Microsoft, we're quite bullish right now. We're going to likely gap up tomorrow. I think we just got some bullish news. We could be looking for essentially this imbalance fill around 516. This could help the market and tech push a little bit more tomorrow morning, but then watch and see if we get a rejection later on. DJT is showing weakness if it doesn't hold 16.94. We could be retesting essentially 16.7. The VIX is on a downtrend, might be dipping a bit lower as we have a falling wedge, but then be careful the lower this goes. Once we get to the low 14s, it does love to bounce. It did this many, many times. So it might dip a bit more as the market pushes higher, but then we're going to be looking to see if this bounces. The 10 year is dipping as a result of Jerome Powell and the Fed. The dollar is also dipping, which is bullish. Crude is also dipping, which is bullish. So for now, the market's bullish. We could be looking for new all-time highs tomorrow. We might be going a little bit higher, but I'm warning you guys that I believe there's going to be a top forming very soon. It could start as soon as tomorrow, if not early next week. And then tomorrow specifically, what's going to likely happen is we push a little bit higher, consolidate, then we might kind of slow down as the day goes on and get like a flat close, a flat or a somewhat red close. And then we're going to see if we're about to form a top early next week to start our pullback after FOMC or not. But I think that's the most likely possibility. On the QQQ, we might push a little bit higher tomorrow morning, go for new all-time highs. Then we're going to see if we slow down or not. And then next week, I do expect there to be more downside. Keep in mind, tomorrow we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment data at 10 o'clock a.m., 30 minutes after the stock market opens, so be ready for some high volatility. And just so you guys know, I am bullish for now. I think the market goes a little bit higher, but I'm warning everyone that a top is likely going to be forming very, very soon. There's a rising wedge on the QQQ, which I think is going to pan out. And also, I think that SPY is getting ready for a top based off our divergences, seasonality, and other factors like that. So that being said, I want to thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys have a very awesome rest of your guys' days. I'll be back with another upload very, very soon tomorrow. Until then, I wish you all the best. I'll see you guys very soon and get ready for another monstrous trading day for tomorrow. Be ready, guys, and be prepared because I do think a top is coming in the upcoming trading days. So be ready and do what you have to do. Thank you for listening, and peace out.